Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be discussing The Liar's Key by Mark Lawrence, book 2 in the Red Queen's War trilogy. I had been meaning to get to this, and I wanted to be finished in April. I'm filming this May 1st, so I didn't quite make it. But I really enjoyed Prince of Fools. It was such a different take on the Broken Empire with a very, very different character. And so I was interested to see where the story continued going, because this trilogy really starts to set some bigger events up that were kind of hinted at in Broken Empire. But of course, the Broken Empire trilogy had a different general plot and was looking more at Jorg and what he was trying to do. Now, please note, I am going to have to do spoilers for Prince of Fools because this is book 2 and those events directly set up what's going to be happening in this book. So if you have not read Prince of Fools, I recommend you do not watch this video. Go read Prince of Fools first. You can watch my review for that, which is spoiler-free for that book. And then you can watch this review, which is spoiler-free for The Liar's Key, but will have some spoilers for Prince of Fools because I kind of have to. With that, so in Prince of Fools, we had Jalyn and Snorri and their quest where Snorri was trying to find his family and didn't quite work out, but even though his family is dead, they do end up finding Loki's key, and now the next stage of this quest begins. This takes place also still simultaneously to the second book in Broken Empire, King of Thorns, and so we hear some bits about that and have some interconnectivity still where the Ancrats are mentioned, where it's mentioned that Jorg is now king of the first place that he had conquered, and we hear some more of that, but really we're taking things a very different direction and looking at more of the bigger events. We get to learn quite a bit about the kind of the big players, which we'd seen some of in Broken Empire, but we are really seeing more of the different people like the Silent Sister, the Lady in Blue. We have Kellum, who's very important, and of course we have the others like, Sages and Skilfar and all of these powerful people and magic users in their places of the world. And in The Liar's Key, it is, of course, all about the key, as the name would suggest, and Snorri's still determined to use that key to go open the door of death and find his family. Jalyn, of course, is less keen to do so at that point. We do get some others picked up along the way, and a really big focus, something that's actually mentioned a ton, which makes sense because it's the title of book 3, and of course it seems is going to be very important, is the Wheel of Asheim. We get the first hints of what the wheel actually is and or was, and the fact that this is the wheel that did actually turn and kind of make reality less real, so to speak. That's a really interesting thing that was talked about in the Broken Empire, and we get a ton more of it here, where reality kind of shifted, and so generally what people believe ends up being true. So we see that when people believe in these powers, or they believe in gods, or these different things, they can, to an extent, become true, and that's where we get this kind of crazy post-apocalyptic world and all the things that are happening and these very powerful people. And this book is where we really talk more about the war going on between the differing factions. You have some that want to continue the wheel turning and kind of destroy reality and just remain in their power, and you have others who want to turn it back and get back to kind of a normal reality, and you've got all kinds of people in between. And that's kind of the big finish that I'm expecting with Wheel of Asheim to do a lot. It'll be interesting to see how closely that aligns with Emperor of Thorns, just based on the kind of the different timelines as well. But I'm definitely excited to see that. We still get a ton of Jalyn and his kind of humor and just his personality, which is really interesting to read. Still very, very different. And getting from him some things that I just I didn't fully expect that we would actually see. There was a few things, especially something in the end. The ending of this book was not at all what I expected. It really makes me wish that I hadn't already planned to read Wheel of Asheim last for May, because I'm very interested to see. But what I really liked about this is it really started kind of its own story. You had Prince of Fools, where it really was a very different narrative, a different structure, different characters, and a very different main character. But to me, I was still looking at it as the shadow of Prince of Thorns, and I found Jorg to be, and I still do, Jorg to be a more compelling character to read, even though he's a pretty terrible person. Granted, Jalen's not great either. But with this one, I really, even though it was still connected, it really started to kind of draw me in on its own merit, and not just the fact that it's the companion trilogy that goes with the Broken Empire trilogy. So I really did like that. I feel like it started to really pick up steam on its own and get really interesting to where it's going to be going for this. And the biggest questions I had could, because there were just hints of it in Broken Empire since it wasn't the focus, seem like they are going to be answered in this trilogy. There's already a lot in there, and it was really cool getting to see kind of the after effects, or the sides of events that we didn't really see. We do get some familiar faces in some different ways, some familiar locations after some major events had happened, and even just some similar items. And we get a lot better of a look at some of the cities that we really didn't spend that much time in, and a look at kind of the banking and the trading aspect, which I was not expecting there to be a few chapters where we see a lot of that going on. But we get kind of a broader look. And so this does, while still actually really doing a lot of work to expand the Broken Empire as we knew it from that first trilogy, still telling a compelling story on its own. Snorri is still a great character, because he's also, him and Jal are kind of polar opposites in a lot of ways, but we start to see that there is some importance to Jal and kind of learn a lot more about him. We do get kind of the two timeline thing. It's not really a two timeline thing in the same way as in Broken Empire here, but we've had from the first book even, there were passages where Snorri would kind of tell a story of something that had happened in his past or explain the events. In this one, we get Jal remembering things that he'd forgotten, and kind of living through memories of his ancestors as well, to set up the stage for some events that have been happening for a really, really long time. And once again, setting out quite a lot. As a middle book, because sometimes the middle book can kind of slump in a trilogy, this didn't feel like that at all. The first book was good, and it was fun, and it told, its own kind of contained arc. This book really is just kind of like rising action, I felt like, the entire time. So I'm really excited to get to Wheel of Oshheim and see if Mark Lawrence sticks the landing, which I think he will, because I really like the ending of Emperor of Thorns, and I think this will answer a lot more questions. So I am really excited to get to it. This is just such a different look than Broken Empire. And I know I've said that, but it's really interesting seeing, once again, Jal not exactly the best guy. He's still just kind of wants his easy life of wine and women and gambling, and still gets himself into trouble that has to constantly fight the urge to just abandon everybody to save his own skin. But we see him find some things that end up being a little bit more important to him than money at some points. But even then, there are so many parts where it's still like you see him and it sounds like he's growing, and he's not always growing as much as you'd think. I think that does make the character more real too, because he didn't just have this epiphany and be like, nah, I'm going to completely stop living the, self-indulgent, selfish way that I've been living my entire life. He's still got a lot of it in him, and there were a couple lines, and this is with no context, so it won't spoil anything, but he's talking about a small boy and says, I could probably grab him by an ankle and shake the money out of him. And then you think like, oh, because he's not actually going to do that. And then he goes into, in fact, I tried 3 times so far. And just like, a lot of still humor in the book too. You get a lot of laughs and heartfelt moments with some of the characters. And it was just very exciting, and a lot of action. And digging into a little bit more of kind of builder tech as well, because we get some glimpses into a little bit more of that. That was always an interesting aspect of the Broken Empire trilogy as well, kind of learning about the world that was our world, but at a more advanced state, and seeing a little bit of a different picture, things we didn't know, that maybe there were some people who actually have been around since the beginning, and even, in fact, survived the cataclysmic event, the Day of a Thousand Suns, and some other things. There were people who had better technology then, and we've seen kind of some of that die out as well as time passes. So some more interesting looks, and some very interesting locations as well. It'll be really interesting to see what ends up happening in the next book. This one, I will note, does end on a pretty big cliffhanger for multiple reasons. We have kind of our main plot end on a cliffhanger, and then we have like a secondary cliffhanger. So it will make you want to read the third book, Wheel of Oshine, pretty quickly. I'm going to try to wait for the rest of this month and read all the other things because I have a ton of stuff to read. We'll see if I succeed or not, but that's what I'm going to try to do at this point. But I would recommend having both, just in case, because you probably will want to jump right into the next one once you finish this book because of the way that it ends. But as always, Mark Lawrence does a really good job crafting a story, weaving a lot of threads together, and just exploring characters of different kinds. There's a lot of focus on how Snorri and Jalin are different, and we get some other kind of great characters in there as well. We get some just fantastic scenes, including the hands down the funniest scene in this book, and probably the funniest scene in any Mark Lawrence book that I've read, because there weren't as many funny ones in Broken Empire, but involves Jalin, who has to fight a duel. And I won't give away any more than that, but the duel was just so humorous in several different ways. The whole way it turned out, and it was just a very fun scene. I read it, and I'm just like, did this really just happen? It was just kind of a ridiculous situation. It made me laugh, though. It was a really good scene. So definitely, if you've read the book, you'll know immediately what I mean. And then if you don't know, read the book, and then you'll find out what I mean with the duel. But it was a great scene. And there was also, and I've heard a little bit about this just from hearing people talk about the series and some of Lawrence's other books, we get a little bit of a closer look at one of the very mysterious characters who appeared in the Broken Empire, and it sounds like may appear in some other books as well. So it was an interesting look there. But we get to learn a ton more about the world and go to different places. It was really interesting kind of seeing the North and the Viking people, because that's not an area that we ever looked at. We still have plot lines with the Dead King and with necromancy and with some familiar faces going on as well, so that it still has that interconnection. But like I said, even with actually more connections, I would say, to the Broken Empire trilogy and your story in this one than the first one, its own story also got stronger, so it's not so much a focus of it being intertwined, but it is so interesting seeing the way that Mark Lawrence has kind of weaved this together. And I said it after the first book, and I still feel that way. It makes me really want to reread Broken Empire. I feel like it'd be interesting to kind of read them alternating. First read the Broken Empire book, and then read immediately after that the Red Queen's War book to kind of see it. Definitely, it's only for rereading, because if you haven't read the whole Broken Empire, Red Queen's War does kind of spoil things because it assumes you already know, as far as builder tech and things like that existing, and kind of understanding that you're in a post-apocalyptic world before you really realize that. That's kind of a slow reveal in Broken Empire, so it would kind of ruin that for you. But on reread, I feel like it'd be interesting just to kind of look at how these things are connected, and how, in some cases, when meeting the same person, how differently Jalin and Yor reacted. And in general, just they are such different characters. So it's a really fun comparison to make when reading these books. But really, those were my thoughts on The Liar's Key. I really enjoyed this one, and like I said, I'm very much looking forward to The Wheel of Oshine and seeing how this one closes in. Closes out would be the phrase I'm looking for. But really excited to see how this one closes out for this trilogy. I'm certainly interested to read more of Mark Lawrence's work in the future. I wanted to kind of start at the beginning and go from here, and I'm happy I did, because I've really enjoyed the ones that I've read so far. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like. Check the links down in the description for our Discord and my other links down there as well, if you want to join the conversation and talk more about this or any book. And of course, if you would like to see more of my content, including my review for the third and final book in the Red Queen's War trilogy, once that is out, make sure to subscribe.